Pauline, our old friend Mark. Mark, welcome back.
Thank you so much. Glad to be back.
And we have two new people as well, Filipe and Pawel. Filipe, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, nice to talk to you guys. Thank you, Matthias. Like, being nice to make it happen. I'm Filipe. I'm a business intelligence manager here at UpCloud. Been 5 years with the guys. Also have been working with many teams, developing our services there, and that we are probably going to talk about more today.
I hope
European
so.
cloud. That's where we are. Yeah.
Hi everyone, nice to be here and thank you for invitation. I'm working together with Filipe, right, at UpCloud, but my role is a little bit different. I'm developer advocate, so I'm just talking, not doing, just bragging about what great things we built, which I didn't build, others built, right? So yeah, I'm just trying to reach as much as possible to the community in the cloud industry. I'm for a long time because I started with clouds around 2014 or something like that. So I saw the many things. Let's say this way.
I think we all maybe have seen the rise from on-prem to cloud, and then the rise most backwards now to on-prem or like a smaller cloud. And I think that's why we are here, because Mark, we meet sometimes and we always talk about different cloud providers, and we're trying to get some cloud providers here as well to feel a little bit on the pulse, like what's going on, what's happening with the European cloud providers, where we're going, what's the challenges, and more or less that. Mark, help me out here. What are we going to ask the first question today? I know you're ready and been excited for it for a long time.
All right. I think let's dive into like maybe the deep end of the pool. I love diving into the deep end of the pool. That's where the real fun starts, I guess. So I think maybe start the conversation a bit light. Let's define them as two separate things, right? We talk about like the cloud, right, and cloud infrastructure. But now we're at the generation where there's actually two cloud infrastructures now. We're talking about traditional cloud infrastructure and the new AI cloud infrastructure. And they're not the same thing anymore. And we shouldn't look at them as the same thing. And so when we look towards Europe, where do we stand? Well, when we look towards traditional cloud computing, we kind of have it figured out, maybe a little less managed services than our competitors across the pond. But if you look towards the AI area, you can see there's a huge endeavor from Europe. And what I say from that is it's not just a money investment, right? Like we look towards the US, I think in 2025, they've invested the best part of $100 billion into this specific industry. At the same time, Europe has only invested a fraction of that, down at like 10 billion. But the difference is Europe is leading this area because we're leaner and meaner in what we have capable. And now we're at the verge of open source AI models that are competing really well against the major providers. So this is where we need a European infrastructure ready for this. So my question then would be to go towards you guys at UpCloud. Like I've seen your GPUs, they look sexy as hell. Where are you guys going with this?
So we have more than just one type of GPU, which we introduced half a year ago or something like that, L40S, right? Today we have a lot more of them. So that's good. If you want to work with inference or machine learning, you have your choices. But you're right. So first of all, with what you call traditional cloud, right? It appeared a long time ago. And for many years, Europe, and not only Europe, was only partially in this race with just kind of VPS offering things like that. Now the whole world really is in this AI race in similar time, right? We started together, we are pushing this together. Of course, US market put a lot of money, a lot of efforts into that. And they also have the proper infrastructure engineering. What I mean by that is, for example, well-known company like NVIDIA, right, provides the chips. But the models like Chinese DeepSeek shows very well that it's not just about putting a lot of money into that. Right? Of course, they started somewhere else than from really the scratch, right? They use other models to teach their model, right? So that's kind of handicap, let's say.
Yeah.
But still, they were able to create this for the fraction of money. And what we see today is there's like another variable in this equation of AI. It's not only how strict, how good the model is. I'm talking about LLMs here because they are the most known and most resource hungry, let's say. But also how much it costs, really. And here is the place where the other players have some advantage, because we start with something what had this thing in mind already, right? Not just to deliver fully blown best possible in the responses LLM, but also cost effective. And I think that is something what gives us maybe not the big advantage, but at least something what the companies should consider in terms of what kind of resources they are buying to offer to their customers, but also what resources I'm buying as a user, right?
Yes.
But like you're really talking, Mark, here about like two different ways, two different hosting things, right? One is like the regular services that you buy, like VPS servers and those things, and they're kind of, when we talk about Europe, they are more focused on CPU and memory, right, based solutions. But then the other part that is sticking up, like when you can pay per request to get LLM or like tokens, right? And that is something that is a lot of them coming in the EU. They use open source modules, and that infrastructure is filling quicker, right?
Yeah, and actually, this is one of the things. Actually, I was at trying to keep track of my week. I was at the Lovable office here in Stockholm about 2 weeks ago, and they were doing a presentation. It was a pretty good demonstration overall. We had our friends from Red Hat that was leading the presentation, and one of the projects that they brought up, which I think, which sadly most of the audience didn't really understand, but we got there, was LMM-D as a project, right? And pretty much like as a project, like they described like all this stuff about like how to do load balancing with LMMs, how to do embeddings, how to do the vertex, and then they just package it all within one daemon to make it simple. And the thing about it is, it's not the technology. We've been using that technology, we've been using that architect for months and years now, but just packaging into one simple, I deploy this one service and I get all of this, that's the game changer. And that's the current problem in the industry. And I think it's a great benefit again towards Europe is that the open source community is driving hard. They have a great foundation there. And then we can utilize that heavily here in Europe to really emphasize our uses, right? We talked about open source LMMs. We're talking about now open source full stacks to improve that LMM, to make it scalable, get it production grade. So like there's a lot going on in this area. And I think like, again, like this is kind of the area that I'm talking about. We're now talking about this architect that just doesn't apply to any other technical stack than AI. So that's where I come into the stance. Traditional, where you can use a database, universal, generic, same with VMs, same with other managed services. But when we get into the AI realms, these tools are very custom towards AI that are not used for anything else. So it's that ecosystem we need to build up. And I think that's where we're going in Europe. And even the major cloud providers like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, they haven't cracked this either, right? Like you can't just go in there and build this big stack. You have to use, as Matthias brought up a moment ago, pay per token to get this level of quality. To build this yourself, you're then piecing it back together, and you're going to end up in the open source community anyways if you're setting these up in the major cloud providers. So I definitely see like looking towards, again, Europe as the main topic here. We have such a great advantage to catch up to these providers like OpenAI, like they've had a leading start, but when you look towards the latest Qwen models, Kiwi, like there's Minstrel, even like what they've been reporting the past few months has been fantastic, and this is definitely going to drive the industry. And this was going to drive it here.
It's good that you mentioned LLMD because just to explain, it's like a high performance and scalable distributed LLM inference engine, right, or framework. So you can easily use this with Kubernetes and things like that. But beside LLMD, we have also the small language models, right? We have a couple of other approaches, VLM and things like that, which allows us to run those tools with, let's say, fraction of the price of huge infrastructure. This is also important, right?
Yeah.
Because even smaller players right now can join the race and be well significant with the results. It's not just about pushing like tons of dollars or euros or whatever, yuans or whatever, but also put there a lot of brain work to make it really usable.
Yeah. But do you see that more something that come up? Like we have all like the API and we start using like Anthropic and all the big models, right? But the new open source is catching up, and maybe you don't need that latest version. And it's there you see the European providers coming in, like can supply you with a lower version, but still to smaller price, right? You could go instead use pay per token instead of going, and then you can also switch to modules, right? If you need something else.
Yeah. And from jumping in on the topic as well, because the pricing is one thing, but the important aspect that I see on the pricing, and this is like one of the aspects that I believe Mark was interested in about, like the directions we're taking, is how we slice this and how we make it like more granular steps. So like we make it, we are lean, and being lean also means like offering leaner options of plans and how to have access to the resources that you need than in comparison to the big clouds. This is a frequent feedback that we had, and we just recently did some revamps on our server plans because of that. Like end users asking for more, more fine-tuned capacities so that, hey, just what I need. And we're about to do the same as well with DBus and other managed services that we offer. So that's the fact, like that mindset of being leaner and understanding that our customers are also, most of them, on that segment makes a difference. Talking about UpCloud, for example, and a few other smaller cloud providers that I know of here in Europe, I think we have in our mindset very like the user orientation here, like the user persona has always been like the open source engineer, experienced platform engineers, senior engineers that wants to have control of things, and they know what they are doing. And they think very carefully about the architecture, how much is how much, like what is an access or not. And we design the products for this type of segment. I think that's something that, when you come from a kind of a little bit of underdog feeling and you understand your alikes and you serve on that level and you create something cool for everyone. That's the essence of the ecosystem I believe the cloud providers in Europe are building, and the big clouds, they had their time to reach that in the very beginning. I think nowadays I see many people like diverging from that because they lost the essence in a way. That's what I see spread out through many, many readings and conferences I've been. So those are the things that play differently and support the pricing, I would say.
Yeah, and I think like if we tried to hit a bit more broader the topic as well, it's like, so when it comes to pricing in general, like Europe has their positioning, right? Like we're I don't know, maybe I have a thought in my mind that seems a bit, let's see if it works, right?
Okay.
We're a bit more old fashioned in a sense, right? If we think towards business back maybe 15 years ago, it was about like providing good service, but not milking every drop of blood out of the stone is the words to use. And I feel Europe still holds that. When you use American services, when you really get into like, okay, what am I really paying for this service? Oh, they're just hosting an open source tool and just putting a UI on top of it. Like, what are you really paying for? You kind of start realizing that you're like, oh, I'm paying 5 times it would be than me have my own engineer almost. Like, how does that quantify? But you don't really see that from European providers. They're making a fair business value and they're bringing that to the businesses, which I think is a fantastic positioning.
I think it's also part of the cultural difference because if we have, I would say on the US side, there is a huge, I don't want to call it shift, but huge use of SaaS products, right? So you are using something what others are delivering. In Europe, we think a little bit differently on it. Yes, we like SaaS, but not that much. right? So if we can, we have always this question, especially here in Poland and other Eastern countries. Why should I use some like foreign service if I can use my own brain power and own the tool, right? Of course, there are pros and cons to both of it. I don't want to decide which one is better, but there are many aspects to it where we need to understand why we select a specific approach and what it gives us in the long term, because it's not just about the short term, like month or half a year. 5 years, next 5 years will come tomorrow, honestly. Time is flying very quickly. And that's why probably in our case, this approach to open source, the understanding of open source, the usage of open source is exactly what we can see, right? Of course, when you use some open source tool, you remove from the equation all those stuff related to support, to having beautifully designed UI and things like that, mostly. But
well, I can kind of pause you there, right? Because that's exactly where Anchor comes into the play.
Exactly.
To bring, is to like, okay, so like, and this is the exact angle that we have seen it as our mission as well. Is like pretty much like the managed services are great, but now I'm vendor locked towards AWS or I'm vendor locked towards GCP. But when you use an open source tool and you control it, then your bureaucracy is in your control. And so one of the things that like we have found, at least with our customers, has been that in most cases, like the Kubernetes environment has matured very heavily over the years. So when we think towards Kubernetes, we have a lot of operators that provide us the installation, the upgrade, the maintenance, error handling, and stuff like that. And but there's still the level of cognitive overload that's still in the area of Kubernetes, right? Everything is still, there's a lot of details, there's a lot of different ways things to be configured. And of course, that's where we have come in Anchor. We focused on, okay, let's provide a beautiful UI, tick off the box, great. And then the second one is, how do we provide it, well, affordable? And the way that we can do that now with AI is that, well, with us, we have built that stack with the LMMD ourselves before LMD was released, which is we built that embeddings. We pumped it in with all the DevOps knowledge that we have and we have come by and stuff like that. And then we've pumped in all these open source services, which means like for us, for example, will be that you can go to UpCloud or you can go to Hetzner or you can go to AWS and click deploy there and off it goes. And the most important thing I feel going into this new era moving forward is that everyone's a coder these days, including the CFO for some reason. And he has ideas of how he wants to deploy things out. But if he ends up in a ticket op scenario, then he is very unmotivated to do so. But he has something that's going to save the organization 50, 60 hours per month on financial administration, So we really want to enable these people as much as possible. And like with at least our old fashioned way of thinking, we can't get there. But with the new tools that are coming out, like the approach we're taking and few others in the arena, even GitHub has their own AI integration now with their own like AI runners and agents built into GitHub themselves. We're seeing this new era kind of arising. And I think one kind of point to kind of go back towards the pricing, I think, compared to the major cloud providers, is that we're also in a different economic world we're in as well. If you think back 10 years ago, right, like Amazon going out there saying, we're going to charge this ridiculous price. And the company's like, yeah, sure, that means we get the market faster. But today, that is not the reality we live in anymore. We live in a reality where the lean and mean is going to win. The ones that have a good runway and survive the harder times are going to win. And that's where, again, Europe comes in as a great one. Like I'm talking to startups from around the world and even in India and in other countries. And even I'm still getting to the scenarios like European cloud providers would work for you as well in India because we have a very good infrastructure, very reliable, and it's affordable. And even for them, they're kind of like, oh yeah, we might actually use that for our heavy data processing, or like there's loads of different scenarios. It's not just about having a fast website. There's a lot going in behind these deep technologies. And now how easy it is to copy a website or an idea, the depth is what gives you your moat in a startup, in my opinion. And I think that's the way we're going. So data processing is going to be a huge thing towards quality.
That's true. And on top of that, I believe on affecting the pricing and also, let's say, adoption in a way. Just last week, I've been at an event here in Helsinki about it's a company that does some sort of, the engineering platform automation or like implementation, if you wish, for slightly bigger organizations. And they even handle kind of, well, slightly big to very big here in the standards of this country. So, but anyhow, they handle exactly that part of the complexity of like the let's say all the layout layer and the pipelines set up like they kind of like they just need basically to understand from the customer what or where is the best provider for those for you in your case, and they build all the layer on top of that, handling the information, but especially the structure for getting to the business value of the data straight ahead, like the semantic layer and the data presentation as I saw. What does that mean? Like they have, it's kind of like if you even you're not fully capable within your company to deal with that, or you prefer to pay some kind of service to do that for you, you can already find locally people handling those infrastructures locally and implementing what you need that removes that complexity out of the, like, let's say the engineering complexity and delivers you the value you want. Faster.
And even now, it's even faster now because these local engineers are using AI to speed up their work. So they're doing it 4 times faster. So now when you need that high availability Redis installation, now they're, instead of it taking a month or 2 months, now we're talking about a week or 2. And that means you're saving money in the implementation as well.
That's true. And 2 things that we discussed there, and also a few cases I've been on a previous event, like hybrid clouds. They are becoming another topology or architecture choice, even for enterprise. Given the issues we had last year, for example, with DNS failures, like half of the world without services, and that was bad. Like concentrating all the cloud or all your infrastructure in only one provider became something not smart, not reliable, not redundant enough for some services requirements, and that impacts your revenue. And that comes like enterprise level, they are very sensitive to that. So that is one of the pushes. The second one, even for the bigger organizations, and of course the smaller ones even more, you may start with something like fully managed because you don't have that much capacity to handle everything in-house, but very quickly you start to learn few things. And one of the things that I collected through many different levels of maturity is you always learn that you can do or implement better architecture or better solutions when you know just a little bit more. So in this event, for example, they were talking about a customer that decided to move. We are talking about perhaps the 3rd biggest company in Finland that decided to move their warehouse solutions from AWS to GCP with slightly less managed services, but they already have mastered many, many things in there. And by the end of the day, there was a cost reduction and a gain of efficiency. Like the engineering overhead, no matter the level you are in terms of maturity or size of organization, is real. And the more you gain experience in cloud, the more you realize you can do differently.
And I think that's a really great point in itself, because like I actually give a real world example will be towards, like, for example, I've been working with a company that has used the GCP approach. They're using all the managed services from the Log Explorer to managed database and so on. And the one thing that we worked with them was like, okay, well, with Anchor, we actually already have the cloud providers there. Like we've integrated with UpCloud, Hetzner, and OVH. And the one thing that became apparent to them was like, oh, suddenly now we can have multi-cloud without investing into it. And they've been dealing with their logs for enough years that they gained the experience of how to know what's good logs, what's bad logs, and stuff like that. And after doing an exercise with them, we end up going as far as moving like the infrastructure and other things to European cloud providers, left their APIs in GCP's GKE, and all the acronyms they're spinning now in my head. But at the end of the result was we dropped the OPEX expenses down by 60% just by moving this, because they already had the skills, things have changed, and now they could take on more responsibility. And like we're talking about $100,000 per year in just the savings alone in this like one organization team,
Steven Borman. He goes to platform teams, and then he always go into Kubernetes cluster, and then he's like tear down all the stuff that they installed that nobody is really using, right? We say it's the same approach when you go to AWS. You go in AWS and you install a lot of stuff, and in the end, right, it's like, what are we using here, right? But then there come the questions like, you go to, for example, and you install a Kubernetes on upload. It's going to be a lot of new stuff that you need to learn, right? You cannot just. I used to tell my mother, right? She knows how to do stuff on her phone, but she doesn't know what it does, right? It's a big difference, right? So if you go to AWS and set up an RDS, you know like how to set up an RDS, but you don't know what it is, right? But if you go,
I think it's,
and that's a big thing. When you go to any European cloud provider, you don't get that. You get a VPS, right? And then you need to install the database by yourself. But the gap in knowledge is always shrinking, because now with a good AI friend, you can get a lot of help, right? But
yeah, and even at that point, right? Like I've been involved with some teams, and only in a very short time, last 2 years, and they'd be using like Google's Cloud SQL with the premium support or whatever. And then when I go in and look at their metrics, it's like, but you're sending all your traffic to one instance of your Hive. Well, like you're paying for it. It looks good on the box. You tick the box. This is the premium option, but you forgot to actually use it. And so even if it's a cloud service, even if you don't know what's going on under the hood, how are you supposed to integrate with it? So it's we sell it as like, oh, it's a nice off-the-shelf solution, just plug into anything, but that's not the reality with most of the services. It's, you have to understand their benefit to understand how they impact your architect, and then when you're at that level of understanding, you're almost close to be able to run it, in my opinion.
The thing is that with cloud services and more managed services and more deeply managed services, the problem is that we develop them or use them in the manner like fingers crossed that it will work. And it will be secure. Let's believe in that, right? But that's not the point very often. And managed services, a couple of years back, were really good option because they removed some skill set needed. Was it good or bad? That's the different story, right? Because like we just chatted before this podcast, that with database you still need to know what is inside, how it works, how it is configured, what are the parameters, but how you build your SQL query and things like that, right? Because these are very important. And the same goes to everything really we do. It's easy to start the virtual machine, right? Your Nginx doesn't perform well. Well, just bring bigger machine. But maybe you should update your configuration. Maybe you should do something with the kernel parameters, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. And today, AI is helping. Can help with that, because with AI, I'm in the position where I am the fan of AI, but not fanboy of AI. Let's say this way. So when you know how to deal with AI and what you want from it, it can help you really quickly to understand the deeper elements of the platform you are using.
I will add a little caveat to your statement, because I do believe like the more knowledge you have, the more power you will get out of AI. But I have learned that there's also a different persona in a person who is so willing to digest the information can equally be as powerful, right? And the reason why I position it like that is because I've met people, it's like, okay, I'm good at, I'm kind of interested or something like that. But if the AI comes back, it's like, okay, how do I make this high availability? You use these tools. Oh, if I use these tools, how can I achieve? And just keep digging in. Like you become a superhero very fast in that scenario. It's the people who don't actually read what the AI responds with. And then it's like, oh yeah, I'll just rush through it. And you're like, yeah. And then you get bad results. It's like, yeah, but you set yourself up for it. So
the one thing as well, sorry to interrupt you, but when we use Stack Overflow, it's the same thing. You don't try to understand what is behind the text. You just copy the snippets, right? And
We've all done it for sure. Absolutely. I
Been
definitely
there,
can't lie.
yes.
Yeah, exactly. But if you're more junior, you need to read the comments around it. You'll bet when it blows up on your machine, you wonder why. You go back and read the comments, So, but to come back to Matthew's point as well, has been that, like, for example, with the AI, when I talk to teams now, okay, we've heard some bad stories, right? We've heard about databases being completely wiped out just a few months ago because of AI. We've heard about Terraforms just actually applying when someone's just asking a question and stuff like this. And yes, these are huge problems. This is because we don't have the right safeguards in place. This is because when we think of, for example, CI/CD, right? It's something we've had for 20 years, but it was built for the professional, not for a child to come into the room and press buttons, right? And that's the change in the momentum that we have to have an AI CI/CD, not just call them the same things, at least in my opinion, because then we can actually build the safeguards into place. Like even for us over in Ankara, the main thing for us was like, of course we can build an agent that does all these things. We're connected to Kubernetes, we're connected to GitHub, we've got the full life cycle, but that's just reckless and it doesn't work in our industry, even though it feels like magic. Sure, but let's get past that feeling of magic and let's get down to the real work. What we have done, for example, is let's build in that validation. Something's like, okay, we've got the AI agents done all this heavy work. It can explain everything that's going on. But in the end, there needs to be a human to review the bill of materials. And if no one is reviewing the bill of materials, the pull request or something like that, then you're setting yourself up to be the next Cloudflare event or AWS event, as we've seen with them with their huge outages that cost them. It wasn't just a quick fix, right? We've lost a full day of work from them.
Yes.
So,
and the problem here is not just that the issue will happen, because it will happen, right? We are just humans, and the equipment is just the equipment, right? It can just be broken. But the problem which we observe, especially recently with different issues, is time to recover, which went much higher than previously when we had experts in-house. Who just knew by the sound of the error, right? Or the length of the line, what is the error.
Yeah, exactly. And now it takes much more time, which I actually believe that's a huge point. I actually read a report from Google. So Google kind of releases this DORA report, which is all about time to delivery on software, time to recover, operations effect, and so on. And they recently released one, I think it was like a month ago, that was focused on now AI in the same arena. And the two things that stood out to me was, the one thing I would say was the statistics, right? We've shown that with AI as power coding, it has produced 46% more code or more deployments. But here's the scary part. They also said in the exact same report, 256% increase in incidents bringing down production during the same number of time. And so that's a really scary scenario to be between. And then if we bring this back to like the EU cloud perspective, then it comes like, okay, how can we get there, right? And that's where it comes in, the managed services versus hosting myself and having the skills, right? And so it's knowing your own organization. I don't think there's anyone in this call that can like say, this is the right way for all companies. It's all scenario based on scenario based. If you have the people internally that's either hungry to learn or has the skills already, you can save money by using open source tools. You can make yourself agnostic. So if for some reason, for example, AWS goes down tomorrow, you can quickly move over to a new cloud provider. But that's only possible by you investing into either the optimization or the skill sets within your team.
Yeah, but you also standardize on things, right? I mean, if you're running Lambdas and AWS go down, you can't really move it that quick, right? You need to standardize something. And the question is like, is Kubernetes that standardization in containers? Like where is standardization going?
Yeah, I think that's a really good one, because you're almost talking about a mixture of a managed service to provide a service. And again, like, there is actually no right answer to what you just gave, because you're literally putting it as, but what happens when I'm vendor locked in? The kind of question answers itself a little bit, and that's the same with most servers, ECS and a few others, so that's why I'm quite strong towards Kubernetes and kind of the open source community, because that flexibility is so powerful in an organization. Like I've dealt with companies that were close to bankruptcy, for example, and for them it was kind of like, well, look, if we actually moved your setup from AWS to Hetzner, then we bring your bill down from $25,000, and I think we got it down to like $800 at the end. And for them, the company is now still alive just for that fact alone.
Because there are two things, really. First is this, what you, Matthias, said, this vendor log. Imagine that you have RDS Postgres database, right, on AWS. And you do the snapshot and things, all of those things which are required from you to do. Is this enough? You may think, yes, you have backups, right? You can restore those backups. What if, and this is like really science, maybe not science, it's fiction, AWS is going down tomorrow, but completely. Where will you be with your snapshots done by AWS on the AWS? So this old-fashioned good PG dump is not that bad idea to do like frequently,
yourself,
right?
Exactly.
And you are able to move this data to another vendor, even under your desk, if this is needed. And the second thing is that this fraction of money is also very important from a different perspective, because let's be honest, we developers are lazy, right? So if we can use some managed service and it will take 5 minutes to create it, it sounds tempting, right? So we do it as a POC. And 5 years later on production, this thing still works, right? Eating a lot of money, eating a lot of power, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. So to challenge a little bit what you, Filipe, said before about moving to different cloud to decrease your bills, you can also do it on the same cloud, because you understand it better, right? But it's just a side point. Generally, I think we are now moving from this as an industry, the using consistently managed services because they are better, right? We are removing a lot of responsibilities from our side. At least we thought that way, right? But it's not necessarily true, because we still need to understand how this message is going through this queue and why I can send only 1,000, not 50,000 in a second, and what to do to be able to send this 50,000. Right?
And to be aware there is that limit, so to plan for when you hit it, right? Because when you hit it, there's no time to fix it, right? So
yes, it's too late. Yeah, exactly. The same, like I always said with Terraform, if you find your vulnerability or misconfiguration deployed, it's already too late.
I think,
sorry, if you can, now just going back, Mark, if you can look a little bit like in the horizon, like where are we going, like with all this stuff, like.
Exactly. And I actually want to, that's exactly where I was going to bring it to. And the one thing I wanted to put it as the fuel behind it is compliance, right?
Yes.
And the reason why I want to bring this up is because we have a burning one here in Europe, the 2nd of August, 2026, right? That's going to be the date that the AI EU Act will start. And that's when Article 50 will start. And the frightening thing is nobody even knows what's going on here. So let me give it a bit of background, right? So the EU, as we know, loves compliances similar to like GDPR. And to be fair, I'm a big supporter for them, even if it means that it's going to make things harder for people. And it comes down to that the EU's core motive is to protect EU citizens and residents. And that's what we're seeing here. So with Article 50, they're basically saying that if anything is AI generated, like an image or content or stuff like that, there needs to be a clear transparency of audit to track how did it come to this conclusion. Yeah. So 2 examples, I think, at least for me, these are the 2 strong examples. We've seen with Grok coming from X.com, where basically you can generate an image with one of your friends' faces and God knows what you can do with it, right? And so the EU is basically coming in with this article. It's like, well, you're going to have to watermark that image, saying that this is AI generated. This is not that real person in that image and stuff like that, which I think is a fantastic one. Like to the level of when you think, like, at least for me, like growing up in Ireland and stuff like that, at the start of the technology boom, you kind of like, yeah, the level of bullying here is way too potential. Yeah. The second one is we think about global politics, right? And again, this is why we are talking about EU cloud to begin with, right? It's like the US has always been has been the go-to for many years, but now we're at the stage where we have US policies in place that say that they're allowed to request any data from your servers without you even knowing about it. The data centers have to comply without ever telling you. And they have a president that does 1,600 trades in a very short period of time. That's bigger than the biggest traders in the world. Like the level of corruptness that's there. Let's not go too deep into it, but the point being is the geographic kind of politics are there as well. What happens when OpenAI starts becoming more extreme with their setup, or Grok or something? How can we stop them from being harmful to our society in a way that they're manipulating us, you know? And that's the part that the EU is coming in. There needs to be a clear way for us to say that this AI model has these safeguards in place to protect EU citizens. And if you don't have them in place, you need to prove that they're in place. So there's no like, I think they're there, maybe they're there. And the other problem with this is if you're using OpenAI, you're going to, what if they remove one of those policies? It's not they're not the ones on the hook for 15 million euro fine. It's you as a business provider. So I feel like this is kind of the area that we're starting to head into with the EU cloud coming into the play, is that if we have AI hosted solutions here in Europe, they're going to be aligned to our values, starting off the fact. The second one being on it is that when we do have them here and we're using open source tools, then we also get the unique economics that actually builds a good capitalist business around us as well. Like if you look towards the US, we're scared that there's an AI bubble, and there probably is to some extent. But if we build it and we're controlling it and we have the unit economics, we're investing it into the right direction. So I think I agree with the act overall. I definitely think it's going to be hard to enforce for sure. But the entire idea of me being able to see what's influencing this model against what I'm giving it, I think that's golden, and I really like that initiative.
Yeah.
So I will surprise you here, because I also like this idea of having this regulated. I'm not, of course we can argue about specific articles and so on, but that's the different story, right? To have this guardrail is very important.
I just want to say that they have a new podcast coming up in 2 weeks when you're gonna be able to rant about this for a very long time.
Okay. Good.
True. Yeah, because we're talking so far, we are talking about here data location and sovereignty from that aspect. But what about the models we are using? So far, I just know Mistral, perhaps, which is kind of like a model, like an European model, so to say. But like, what are the others? I hope really the Act helps with that. But before that, like with the Act, I would say, even on the commercial and other, like, let's say commercial practices, even earlier than Digital Act, the Digital Commercial Act that in EU, we have it a couple of months ago. We had 2 or 3 EU investigations about big clouds and their commercial practices as well, like with allegations of gatekeeping and other sorts of unfair marketing competition that makes it difficult for the local clouds to win deals. I think that's an important background as well, to increase the chances that we can develop the European cloud as so, and to our local realities. I think that that also explains why, okay, most of the money and most of the products and all these big three comes from the US as well. Like how powerful is the commercial machine there? Like I think this is the balance that I'm expecting in the direction I expect that the Digital Act and the AI Act also brings up. Those.
So I'm in complete support of what you're saying, and that's why I think, like, when we talk towards like what you guys are doing at UpCloud, for example, regarding like providing the GPUs, and I imagine like your future will be more providing managed services around setting that up. That's gonna like fire this momentum, right? It's just like I'm invested in like, and sorry, I'm sidetracking a little bit on my sentence. Would be the other thing that I've noticed with people like developers that are choosing services, they want to choose European solvency companies. They want to, because of the fact that when I give my money to UpCloud, for example, that's going into the European society that's built that I support. That's why I'm living in this country, right? These are the values I follow. And that's why, like, I'm seeing a lot of organizations, like on Reddit, for example, and people are just asking, it's like, how can I get this service, but from a European provider, because I have a strong personal belief here, you know? And I think that's a fantastic thing to see, that people, individual people, are supporting Endeavor, not just the companies or on those levels.
Definitely, yes. And I see this exactly on conferences.
Right. There are also gaps, because, I mean, developers can't just run like their Next.js app and get it running kind of simple in EU providers today, right? You still have to go to the VPS solution, right? Get a VPS, and then you end up with that SA key and all that stuff. It's much simpler today because you can have your cloud, but it's not as simple as going into Vercel and just connecting your GitHub account, and then you get your app running. So I think that's the trade-off today, right? It's not as simple as developer, and before it was really, and now today, if you go to UsePry, it's really simple. Here's the gap between the US and the UM providers, I see, right?
Yeah, if you ask me, like I would say, like, if you are in that and on that position, and like I've been seeing even in enterprises here, like people considering European sovereign clouds, and I think that's amazing. But you need to embrace hybrid and diverse, because like we have providers in Europe that can give you like some, let's say, out of the box managed services alike, but not the same thing.
Yeah.
There's also the mindset and let's put all the certification business behind the big clouds, you know, that created a mindset and a skill set of its own that's very hard to replace, you know, overnight.
Yeah.
And I think the if you ask me, my, you know, 2 cents here, the direction I think we should go is like, should be very careful. Like, we not trying to build like the European, you name which one of the big 3 alternative, like as if one player would have it all, but really smartly integrating the ecosystem we have here to make it more integrated and conveniently integrated. And I believe the infrastructure comes for that purpose a lot, you know, to help with leveraging the potential of the local clouds and those specific products. And I think that's the way here, like how to not doing, but like to be successful in this business here in Europe, you know.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it sounds like almost like excuse that I'm not moving to the European provider because you don't have so many services like AWS, Azure, or whatever. But when we started, this is the first thing, right? So they had like a couple of years, let's say, of the being behind, like starting before we started, right? But also, this works both ways, really. If you start with using UpCloud today with some part of the workload, it helps us to develop more services, more approaches, better services for you, right? It goes both ways, really.
Yeah, I think that's really dead on point. And that's the exact point I was trying to make with the people choosing European solvency for their home projects, for the choices that they make in the company, adding them to the RFI reviews. Like, this is what's going to make the difference as well. And that's going to get us to catch up to them. Now, the question is, do we need to, like, we have an idea of AWS, what a managed service looks like, but do we need to get there? Like, is it going to be the same? I don't know. It's a hard question to say where the future is going to go with the need.
It's like, are like the next generation of cloud that are being built, are they going to be like AWS, GCP, or are they going to be something else, right? We don't know, right? Maybe it's going to be something else that we're on. Maybe it's just going to be AI model. I don't know, right? So maybe it's good to not copy what we have today and like see where are we going, like.
Yeah. Like, I've even met people that's like they still haven't, like, I've met like DevOps, sysadmins and stuff, and even just in the past few weeks. And when I talk to like, oh, you're using AI, they'll answer, yes, I'm using AI. But then I asked was like, so how do you tackle these problems? And like, oh yeah, I'll try to figure it out. And then I'd ask the chat along the side, and then it will start to figure out pieces for me. I'm like, okay, but you're kind of in the AI of 3 years ago, because now we're in the stage of the way that you can be the most powerful, like, developer is by using multiple agents to perform the task, and you are the mentor, you are the leader, and that's how you get to that 10x developer that we've heard a lot about, but no one actually talks about how you get there. But the problem is, and this is again where the EU cloud comes in, is that when I use these solutions like Claude and stuff like that, I say to like, okay, I'm having problems with this service. And what it will do is it will go through all my secrets, everything that's going on, and it's passing all my company's intellectual property, secrets, configurations, everything that's there directly to Claude. Claude uses that for training their model. And in some cases, they say you can untick it from training the model, but their staff still has access to that data. So like, it's not a bulletproof, like, oh, I'm now in incognito mode with this provider. That doesn't exist, especially with the cloud. So again, I think coming back to like the EU cloud or even self-hosting your own model, it is super powerful now because we're getting more embedded into it. Company secrets are so important. And like, I think what we're at the end of next month is when Claude releases their audit AI agent. I can't remember the name at the top of my head, but and that's going to change the game altogether as well. Like, it's going to be like, oh, we found these secrets within a couple of seconds, right, belonging to these organizations. Like, I know someone who works in the biggest bank in America, for example, and they told me that Claude reached out to them back in March and told them that they found a crap load of vulnerabilities belonging to the organization, and they have until the end of June to get them resolved before the model will be released and anyone can look this up. And this is what's happening right now. We've heard about this model 6 months ago. It's quiet down, but it is going to be a game changer to the auditing industry and how we perceive like the industry standard by itself as security. So again, like just to roll back my point is, I would much rather have like an AI model hosted with UpCloud than use Claude, because in that scenario, I have restricted my data. I know there's no spying going on from the US or my competitors, for example, on my data, and just being have that like isolated control is super powerful. And like, yeah, it's going to be your lead, right? If you have a model trained upon this new edgy feature you have, like everyone's used Lovable, for example, and you always end up with the square grids coming out all the time because that's the base of the model. You definitely want to protect your intellectual property. It's what makes the moat, So I think the hosting your own models is definitely going to be the hybrid of the future, in my opinion.
I agree. Yeah, we will have like a base models, like for the groundwork, and then rest of it will be like fine-tuned at least, or even re-teached, let's say, for specific use cases. And exactly, the recent things which happened with GitHub or Grafana, right? So it's exactly this. It's not only about how well we protect ourselves, but how quickly those things will appear when we do something wrong.
Yeah.
People, we are coming up to like an hour, and it's gonna be time to stop this. Time goes so quick.
Oh my gosh, that was fast.
Yeah, it is.
I have 2 more questions. One is for Filipe and one for Pawel. Martin talks so much, so sorry. Where do you see like UpCloud going now? Where is the products you're gonna start filling in, like, and start adding, like, what are companies asking for features from EU providers? Like, where do you have to take on that question?
Yeah. How can I say something without giving that much spoiler? Like,
yeah.
What I would say is, like, I think the GPUs and the AI definitely has proven to be one of the biggest demands, and especially for the AI infrastructure and the things we started the session with discussing the ability to pay by tokens or by inference. I would say, I cannot say that much, but I would say, like, we are definitely looking at that with much care, planning a lot, and, like, I hope we will be doing things towards that direction. I think that's one of the proven, immediate needs. Another one that I've been personally hearing through events I've been on the BI and data organizations related, that I hope we can start figuring out ways in Europe in general to do at Cloud 2 is, how do we offer some sort of like data cloud, data platform clouds, the same way that we see happening, especially with like Databricks and Snowflake. The number of questions that I heard from, media and bigger companies, like, hey, if I want to move away from Snowflake and Databricks, what do I use in Europe? Where do I go? Like this is still like somehow a niche, not so exclusive, but a niche that I think we need to discuss. And we are, looking at that as well carefully. I think those would be my highlights here, like on directions, where our roadmap would be going.
If I may add here one thing, also not reveal too many things, that what I hear also from developers during different events is to create the more complete, not complex, complete ecosystems of the things we can use together. So, for example, if you have, I don't know, the tool A and you work with this tool A using tool B and C, bring it to the to the ecosystem to have this like a complete tooling, right?
That's interesting. I was going to ask you, like, what is your developer take? Okay, we have 30 seconds left to Mark. Mark, do you want to add something? 30 seconds now to the end.
Yeah, I think like what we're seeing now at the moment, developers, self-service is definitely the way moving forward. Making this infrastructure available to them is going to be key. It's not about isolated DevOps. It's about empowering them as much as possible. Innovation is going to drive forward, and we need to move that as fast as possible. That's my final words for sure.
Great conversation. Thanks for doing.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
You have been listened to DevSecOps Talks with Matthias, Andre, and Paulina. For notes and information, please visit devsecops.fm. Thanks for tuning in.